So this the program of church management we started 3 years ago at the Holy See, and asked us to begin this program. And Holy Father Pope Francis himself encouraged us with the program. We are now within the third year or third cohort of students who are engaged in the course here in Rome at our main campus. We have close to 50 students right now, really from around the world. Many of them are priests. We also have a number of bishops who take part and some lay people. And the vision that we have is that the Catholic Church, we hope, can become truly an example for the implementation of the Catholic social teaching by means of implementing best business practices, so that Pope Francis's request that the church be a poor church for the poor, so that the church might use her resources in this world the most effective way possible for the sake of her mission, which is evangelization, which is winning souls for Christ. Therefore, our aim is not to make clerics into managers, but instead to capacitate them so they can exercise their priestly, kingly function in such a way that they can effectively entrust to lay professionals much of the management and financial leadership, business responsibilities of the church institutions which they govern, so that they can, while at the same time exercising their priestly function with Christ as head of the church, they can be fully dedicated to their sacramental ministry. Therefore, the program of church management truly has a spiritual vision and a theological aim of bringing about real transparency so that the laity can truly participate fully in the governance and management of the church. This is our vision, and so we certainly want to ask the Holy Spirit to come upon us. And we, in fact, ask our Lord to bless all of our students here in Rome and around the world, and also the future students that we will have in a number of programs that we are reaching out with workshops around the world. And these webinars fit perfectly within this mission that we have with the program of church management to really leverage the talent that we've been discovering around the world, and also using the case method, whereby we can learn from one another to implement the best business practices.
Good afternoon to everybody there. I'm Brother Tom Kearney, and I'm a member of the Congregation of Christian Brothers. And I'm speaking to you actually from Arusha in Tanzania, which is a neighbouring country to Kenya, and it's part of our East Africa district. Our congregation was founded by a layman, a widower, and a successful businessman, Blessed Edmund Rice, in 1802 in Waterford, in response to a call he experienced to empower especially the poor boys through education. I myself have been actively committed to this charism and ministry within the evangelization of the mission of the church for my life as a brother, involved in teaching and administration in education institutes at primary, secondary and tertiary levels in both Australia and for the last 24 years here in East Africa, in our Africa province, both through classroom interactions and leadership and administration. The newer, wider world outside of Europe was opened up to the movement of Europeans from the 1700s. And Europeans moved to this new world, to the Americas, Australia, Asia and Africa, to find a new and better life, and to share in the riches of the resources of these countries. And this continued and confirmed a period of colonization of the New World. Our original Irish brothers went out in mission to serve the Irish people who had migrated to various parts of the New World as it opened up in the second half of the 19th century. In the case of Africa, they began to bring schools to educate the children of the Irish immigrants, beginning in Kimberley in South Africa in 1897. The legacy of school involvement and management has continued in South Africa and in Zimbabwe. Brothers from the UK began education ministry in Liberia and Sierra Leone in Western Africa in the early 1960s. And the work of the Irish brothers spread into Zambia about the same time. The brothers from Australia made foundations in East Africa, in Tanzania and Kenya in the late 1980s. and all of them were mostly associated with education, evangelization mission of the church through schools and community development. When these first brothers and the early missionaries moved into Africa, they didn't come into a situation with no guidelines about education and human formation. Jomo Kenyatta, the founding father and first president of Kenya, first published his ideas on education in 1938. His thesis was published under the title Facing Mount Kenya, and in it he wrote, "The study of the Kikuyu system of education should reveal to European educationalists how the character of individuals is formed within the family circle, then within the local group, and then within the whole tribal organization through a course of initiation ceremonies. And it should give them the process of character formation in the routine of the Kikuyu life history with its numerous age groupings." Kenyatta highlights the fact that the Kenyan tribal societies had developed a way of dealing with the formation of character through a life process and had not concentrated on a training process in institutions such as schools. They had in fact recognized that this character formation did not take place in an isolated and exclusive environment, for its whole purpose was to socialize the particular person into a way of life that was governed by the values, traditions, and vision of this particular people. Formation education was the necessary journey into full membership of the tribe. In the traditional African societies, the life of the people was extraordinarily integrated. People expressed this in the way they lived and experienced and made sense of life itself. They lived out their relationship to the Supreme, to each other, to the world around them, through rituals and contacts with spiritual leaders. These were the daily encounters, their prayers with spiritual, greeting the Great Spirit, making offerings, placating the spirits through whom the Great Spirit communicated with them, and consulting the shamans. They were but a few of these contacts as part of the ordinary way of life. In practice, much of this was built upon the understanding that I am because we are, the foundation of their identity. It was not limited to the Supreme Being and spirits, nor to acts of worship. It focused on the eternal question of what it means to be human, the recognition of human and spiritual powers, and the presence of evil and suffering in the world order. This provided a basis for ethical behaviors and good order in the community. The sacred oral traditions were handed down from generation through stories, ritual, through education, and by the participation in various rites of passage, which make holy all of life. This had been going on for many centuries and perhaps millennia, and predated the coming of the missionaries and the colonialists. It certainly predates organized schools. It is the way in which people have coped with the challenges of life. It was how people made sense of life and created their own meanings. It has many lessons to teach, even in our more complicated and complex world of the 21st century. The experience of the expansion of the old world into the new situation brought about a radical change of lifestyle for the indigenous people. The expansion of colonialism and the movement of church mission evangelization got somehow intertwined, often working together for their own different ends. The agricultural and mining industries began to flourish. Mass education was introduced through European-style mission schools. And these were created as a way of helping the indigenous people to transition to the new economic wider world. The churches were working hand in hand with the colonists in this venture. The churches, the Catholic Church, the Anglican, Presbyterian, and Lutheran churches were the main initiators and managers of this radical way of changing society and its way of forming its people. When many African countries obtained their independence from the colonizers, mostly in the early 1960s and 70s, the church school systems became the national school systems. The churches then became the spiritual and moral authorities. Some schools were nationalized and considered as church-sponsored, and the churches remained as sponsors, supervisors, board members. Some schools remained private, and the churches retained total administrative responsibility. Strangely, it's those private schools which became schools for the rich. As well, the national governments built their own government community-owned schools. My own congregation is involved in the management of both private schools and Catholic-sponsored schools throughout the continent. The situations are quite different, at least in Kenya. In the private school, the congregation is responsible for finding the resources for the management of the school, the hiring of teachers, the paying of salaries, the provision of school physical resources, and all enrichment needs of the school. In the Catholic-sponsored school, the congregation is having a seat on the board, and the board has limited powers to advise the government, through the head teacher, on the management of the school, on the ethos, vision, and mission of the school, and to raise financial resources for additional facilities or to sponsor board teachers. The government provides for the appointment and payment of the allocated teaching staff, the normal administrative costs, and classroom facilities. The board may also advise the education ministry on the appointment of key personnel within the schools. At the funeral service of Archbishop Emeritus of Mombasa, Archbishop John Njenga, in November 2018, President Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president and son of the first president, acknowledged the impact of the churches and the Catholic Church in particular when he directed the education ministry to restore church sponsorship of schools which traditionally used to be under their care. There are many schools, he said, built and sponsored by churches. Restore that sponsorship. And I have also given 1 week to restore all church-owned land and schools to their rightful owners. Emphasizing the importance of the moral impact of the ethos and vision of church schools, for these schools focus more on integrated personal development rather than on just gaining qualifications. The president said, the government will also start to engage more closely with religious organizations to enforce better morality among school children. He said the level of indiscipline among school children, especially of those in the national government schools, points to the fact that there is something missing in their lives. The president promised that the government will restore chaplaincy in schools to help in mentoring and guiding children. The first president of Kenya, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, told the Amasaic bishops in the early days of his presidency, "You are the conscience of the society, and if we go wrong and you fail to correct us, one day you may answer for our mistakes." As supervisors and sometimes managers of schools, church personnel bear an obligation to carry out these responsibilities in a consistent way. We need to have familiarity with the vision of a Catholic school. We need to spell out that vision. Our Catholic schools focus on personal development of the students. Even the national governments acknowledge that. Our education plan is based on values and on the encouragement to behave well out of respect for the people around us and to maintain our standards for the surrounding communities. We need also to develop a strategic plan to make that vision possible. It emphasizes the pastoral care of students, the performance standards we expect of teachers and administrators, safeguarding policies for our students, especially the more vulnerable ones. The motivation for students to seek to be the best they can be. We try to arrange for assistance for the needier students with sponsorship and financial support. We need to create the mechanisms to be able to implement, monitor, and evaluate the progress. In Kenya, to skill our school people, the Catholic institutions such as the Catholic University of Eastern Africa and Tangaza University College have developed programs, both academic, in masters and PhDs of education, in leadership and management, and also in the area of teacher training and curriculum development. And they've developed non-academic training programs, seminars and workshops for school staff. A further area of great importance is the provision for training for teachers and school administrators in the area of child safeguarding. The gathering of financial resources and sponsorships to provide this training is a challenge for many institutions. Where most of the African countries are dependent on assistance from external sources, such as bilateral arrangements with various countries, grants and loans from the World Bank, it's difficult for those institutions serving the poor to raise the necessary resources without outside help. The inability to rein in unbounded corruption does not help either. And this moves me on to the challenges the Christian brothers and those managing Catholic schools face. The first is to be able to cooperate with the government-led initiatives in education. In Kenya, the National Government Education Ministry legislates for curriculum, qualifications for teacher employment, enrolment of students, and examinations of performance at the end of primary and also secondary schooling. Often such decisions are made without consultation with the stakeholders, including the churches, which leads to insecurity and lack of planning time among policy implementers. The current situation in Kenya relates to the introduction to the recently adopted competency-based curriculum. Most schools, governments, and churches are struggling to have trained teachers familiar with the curriculum, and they lack the necessary resources to implement the desired changes. Catholic-sponsored teacher training institutions participate in these trainings wherever possible. A second challenge is to find like-minded people with knowledge and management experience to assist with membership of school boards. People who are prepared to go that little bit extra to help develop the schools and to oversee the managed growth and development. The third challenge is finding the financial resources to develop the school facilities, but also to continually upgrade the teaching resources, especially with the technological advances being made at this time. There is a constant pressure to digitalize classrooms with computer and internet facilities and to enable students to enter this new communication world. This can be a major challenge when the government is still struggling to provide constant electricity to many regional centres. As a congregation, we Christian brothers have had to resort to tapping into the resources of our sister schools in the developed world to seek financial support and assistance. Many of our schools in places such as Australia, Ireland, and the UK have been ready to support requests for development and have often begun to engage in immersion visits to continue to show interest in the African projects and also to introduce their own students to the concepts of social justice across the world, not just in their own country. This has created links that have been valuable in funding development initiatives in various schools and institutions. A further challenge is the training of teachers to a level of competency to be able to implement these changes. Many teachers are reluctant to make the choice to take the chance to upgrade their skills, to be able to bring these changes to the way they teach. This creates a certain stagnant approach in schools. The Catholic universities and teacher training colleges have provided some in-service support in these situations. Through such challenges, though such challenges may be many, they will not deter us. If we understand where our education ministry of school management fits into the greater scheme of evangelization. In Africa, in most parts of Africa, we are still in the initial stages, even after many years of initial catechesis. The depthing of the Gospels in the lives of our Christians, in our churches and Catholic institutions, still has a long way to go. As an African proverb tells us, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you must travel with others. So we go with others and we make haste slowly. Thank you for listening and for sharing with these ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I suggest to pass to Miss Ferrer instead of having now the questions, and have the question at the end of the seminar. Okay. So I give you the floor. Thank you for being here. And yes, please. Do you have a slides to share?
Yes, I have slides.
Okay. So you share the desktop, I think.
Yes. Good evening from the Philippines. I am Doris Ferrer. I'm the Executive Director of the Private Education Assistance Committee. So I'd like to start by introducing the Private Education Assistance Committee. It is a 5-man committee that was constituted by government to be the trustee of the Fund for Assistance to Private Education. And it has auxiliary functions allowing it to manage and administer contributions, donations, grants, or loans from the Philippine government for programs of assistance for private schools. As you can see, the chair of PAC is the Secretary of the Department of Education, that is stated in the executive order. And one of the members of the committee is the President of the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, who at this time is Father Elmer Dizon. What is significant about private schools in the Philippines is that all Catholic schools are private schools, and they predated the public school system. At present, we have both public schools and private schools, but I will show you the data that shows how lopsided the numbers are in favor of the public school system. I am giving you this background because in the Philippines, all Catholic schools are private schools. At the elementary level, private schools' share in enrollment is 9%. While 91% of all students in the Philippines are in public schools. At junior high school, 82% of all students are in public high schools, while 17% are in private schools. At senior high school, that's grades 11 and 12, 53% of all students are in public schools, while 44% are in private schools. And at the tertiary level, we have 53% of all students are in the private schools, while 47% are in the public schools. More significantly, the PAC actually co-implements subsidy programs that allows private school students, those students in the Catholic schools, to receive subsidy from government. As you can see, the increase in the enrollment from elementary to junior high, the senior high, and at the tertiary level is largely because there are subsidy programs at junior high school, at senior high school, and at the tertiary level. These programs are legislated. We have the Education Service Contracting Program, the Teacher Salary Subsidy Program, in-service training programs, and the voucher program for senior high school. As you can see, one of the members of the PAC is the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines. And we also have data on CAP, which tells us that we can safely say that about 40 to 50% of all students in the private schools are actually coming from the Catholic schools. That the students are Catholics, though, is another story altogether. It is especially significant that in 2021, the Catholic Church in the Philippines will celebrate the advent of the Christian faith in our land, brought to us by the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan at the behest of the Spanish monarch King Charles V. For some, the arrival of the Spanish conquistadores formed part of the process of Spanish colonization, but for us, it paved the way for the coming of Christianity in our land. I share the observation of my fellow Kapampangan, Bishop Ambot David, when people criticize our alacrity for the upcoming celebration of the 500th anniversary of the gifting of our faith in our land, that the same Christian faith that the conquistadores tried to use in order to pursue their colonial purposes in our country also inspired our revolutionaries around 3.5 centuries later to dream of freedom and democracy. We do recognize the significance of Magellan's landing on the sands of Limasawa in southern Leyte, the celebration of the first Mass, the gifting of the cross, the image of the Blessed Mother and the Santo Niño to the local rulers. Magellan's arrival started the work of evangelization in our archipelago. Today, we rank third of all the countries in the world with baptized Catholics as citizens, and we take pride in numbering first in Asia. More than 90% of our population identify themselves to be Christians, and more than 80% recognize their membership to the Catholic Church. As a church, we have a reason to celebrate. We ought not to deny ourselves of the achievements Christianity brought to our land, our presence in the margins and the peripheries to advance social welfare, provide mission-oriented education, offer pastoral ministry, among others. In 2021, we will celebrate the Christian faith the natives of our land welcomed as a gift, albeit from people who were not necessarily motivated by the purest of motives. God indeed can write straight even with the most crooked lines. I think as Catholic schools we have a reason and a moral imperative to look critically at our current context, knowing fully well that we are in the business of education because we have been missioned like Christ. Here are some realities that we are currently confronted with and which should be part of the challenges of all school leaders for Catholic schools at present. There is a global learning crisis. Reality number one. Brother Armin Luistro, during the OIEC World Congress in New York City, made reference to a study made by UNESCO that almost 20% of learners still lack the basic skill sets in reading and mathematics to navigate the world. It has made a serious dent in the abilities of countries and job seekers to seize the benefits of technological change. Children and young people are simply not learning, even those who are already involved in our schools. Let us think about the situation of the Philippines. Very recently, state think tank Philippine Institute of Development Studies has called on the Department of Education to issue clear instructions to elementary schools to stop allowing non-readers to graduate. The recommendation was contained in the study conducted by PEDS, scrutinizing pressures bearing down on public school teachers and how this impacts the quality of basic education in the country. The report, titled Pressures on Public School Teachers and Implications on Quality, said grade 7 students who could not understand what they read were among the perverse effects of the performance evaluation and incentive system of the DepEd, which pushes for a zero dropout target. Last December 4, 2019, the Program for International Student Assessment released its student assessment results for 2018, and the Philippines ranked in the low 70s over the 79 countries participating in the assessment done by the OECD. The Philippines ranked 79th in reading out of 79 schools, with an average of 340 against the OECD average of 487. Filipino students also ranked low in math and science, with 353 points and 357 points respectively, against a 489 OECD average for both categories. On another matter pertaining to why there is a learning crisis, A Rappler News report written by Mara Cepeda reported that around half of the teacher education institutions or schools which offer education courses for aspiring teachers in the country have been performing poorly in the licensure examinations from 2009 to 2017. In the past 9 years, takers of the licensure examination for teachers registered a dismal 31% passing rate, according to a recent study by the non-governmental organization Philippine Business for Education. The study showed that 497 out of the 1,024 TEIs who had graduates take the elementary examination performed below the national passing rate. The same goes for 637 out of the 1,258 TEIs for the secondary examination. Of course, it also does not help that there is a significant difference between the salaries of private and public school teachers in the country today. That private schools, Catholic schools, have a serious problem of teachers migrating from the public schools to the private schools to the public schools. Quality instruction is definitely compromised by such teacher migration. On the matter of parent involvement, which is posited as an important factor for academic success, according to a news report by Aris Rufo from ABS-CBN, there are about 3 to 6 million Filipino children left behind as parents pursue work abroad. Filipino children with OFW parents may feel the economic benefits of parents working abroad, but various studies show that children do not recognize this as a form of care. Thus, children of migrants are less socially adjusted. The data for the news report came from a study conducted by UNICEF and Migrante Anak Pamilya Foundation. Reality number 2. If the learners cannot even learn basic English and fundamental arithmetic, what more for the Christian values that they ought to learn in the Catholic schools? Learning builds on meaningful relationships. Relationships at all levels require mutual understanding. If a parent does not understand the needs of their children, what do you think would happen? If a teacher does not understand his or her students' needs and context, can authentic learning actually happen? Most educators impose on their students what they have learned for themselves. The challenge for us is to understand the context of our learners. What do they read? What breaks their heart? What moves them? It is in this light that Catholic schools in the country should understand digital natives, the learners in our schools at present. The digital natives are said to be individuals who grow up alongside communications technology. Now, this is very interesting for the Philippines. 76 million Filipinos use the internet, according to an annual global report. The time spent online daily by Filipinos increased from 9 hours and 29 minutes last year to 10 hours and 2 minutes in 2019, the highest in the world. There are also about 76 million social media users. The country also ranks first in social media use for the 4th straight year at 4 hours and 12 minutes. How then, as Catholic educators or teachers in Catholic schools, do we engage the digital? Reality number 3. Are our students prepared to live and to meet the demands of the future? We all know that the 4th Industrial Revolution is creating massive changes in the way we live, work, and relate with one another. Professor Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, said, "There has never been a time of greater promise or greater peril. A time of greater promise because the world becomes more and more connected. New products and services are developed to take advantage of the technologies. But it also is a time of greater peril. With the speed and scale of the changes, some jobs will become obsolete, and this poses a challenge to us as educators." According to company's survey for the Future of Jobs report released in 2018, we should expect workplaces to drastically change, and the emerging in-demand roles in the period 2018 to 2022 have actually changed. We have data analysts and scientists, AI and machine learning specialists, software and application developers and analysts. Aside from proficiency in the new technologies, there's also growing demand for skills such as creativity, originality, initiative, complex problem solving, etc. Are the schools ready to future-proof our learners? Reality number 4 in the Philippines. We still have not recovered as Catholic schools from the legislative shock brought about by 3 landmark laws. Kindergarten became universal because of Republic Act number 10157. We added 2 years to our basic education. That's the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. So we now have K-12. And we also very recently enacted the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, or RA 10931, that gives tertiary education subsidy for students in private schools. As we inch towards 2021, Catholic schools in the Philippines continue to discern the relevance of their work in the various levels of our educational communities. We continue to ask, are we genuinely immersed in the life world of our students? Are they experiencing authentic learning in our school communities? Are our students prepared to live and to meet the demands of the future? And in all this, have our educational communities enabled the work of salvation? In a recent address I made in the Annual Assembly of Catholic School Superintendents, I proposed several action points as Catholic schools struggle to reposition themselves in the Philippine education landscape, given the current realities. I started with the thesis that given the current realities, there is a heightened concern regarding the value proposition for Catholic education. Why will parents spend for a Catholic education when there's increased public provision and there are several other private schools, stock family-owned and for-profit institutions, especially with the various subsidy programs that have significantly increased in the last 10 years? A second thesis that I'd like to make is that education is an experience good. This means just like a ticket to a theme park, experience goods are those that can only be evaluated after the product has been purchased and experienced. Schooling is a user experience journey. Given this thesis, here are the action points that I propose. Catholic schools should focus on the learning. The school should ensure that the students are learning. So we should be serious about pre-test, post-test. We should track student progress, use data analytics to form interventions. No learner should be left behind, but this does not mean blindly promoting learners. It means doing all the work to ensure students are learning and are up to standard. No shortcuts. Second, we should focus on developing high-performing teachers and instructional supervision that is on target. This will mean that faculty development programs are needs-based, strategic, and differentiated. As with learners, teachers cannot be subjected to one-size-fits-all programs. The same way we expect our teachers to be concerned about their students, Catholic school leaders should be concerned about their teachers' growth as professionals. This will also mean that instructional supervision should be given enough time for mentoring and coaching of instructional supervisors and for equipping themselves as well to focus on the alignment across curriculum, assessment, instruction, and ensuring that the VMG of the institution permeate all programs and initiatives. The vision, mission, goals, and philosophy of Catholic schools is the why for all Catholic schools, and this should permeate all programs and initiatives. Number 3, focus on parent involvement. Schools should invest time on being systematic with parent formation programs, planning and implementing milestone events at every grade level that will involve the parents. Where there are no parents, schools should work with a family member who is tasked with caring for the learner. There has to be at least one family member working with the school. And when there's really none, then the school takes on the more active role in parenting the learner. And lastly, ensure compliance with the Philippine Catholic School Standards. The Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines has actually developed the Catholic School Standards, which have 5 important domains focusing on different areas of operation of Catholic schools: Catholic identity and mission, leadership and governance, learner development, learning environment, and operational vitality. Benchmarks and standards have been written for all these 5 domains, and Catholic schools in the Philippines are strongly encouraged to ensure compliance with the PCSS. There also is a program that has been implemented by CAP focusing on transformative education. This is the JIPG, or the Transformative Education Program of CAP. J stands for Justice and Peace, E for Ecological Integrity, the other E for Engaged Citizenship, P for Poverty Alleviation, G for Gender Sensitivity, and Y for Youth Empowerment. These action points are rather difficult and need the mission-driven school leader who is also an instructional leader among many other characteristics. The PAC has actually developed quality assuring instruments to certify that schools participating in the subsidy programs are compliant with the requirements of the Department of Education. Looking at the instrument's areas of evaluation, the core and the support will give us a very good idea of how school leaders should cope with their many responsibilities. In the area of instructional leadership, for instance, it is expected that the principal is primarily an instructional leader who continuously seeks ways to improve the school's teaching learning processes and environments and improve student performance. In the area of administration and governance, leadership and governance commits to the attainment of the school's philosophy, vision, mission, goals, objectives, and core values through its programs and services. As you can see, we really have to ensure that we can overcome our problems and challenges in the area of mission and managing Catholic schools today in the Philippines. Thank you and good evening.
Okay, thank you very much. And so I have some questions. First to Brother Kearney. You talked about many challenges, like finding good teachers, which is a challenge also in the Philippines, and finding financial resources and cooperating with the local government. But do you have a specific challenge for Catholic schools? Like, for example, is there a problem in keeping the Catholic identity of your schools? Because, I mean, the difficulty in finding teachers not only qualified, but also rooted into the Catholic teachings, and or the secularization of the society, which has arrived also in Kenya with globalization. So do you think this is a problem, and do you have a response to that problem in the Catholic schools in Kenya?
Professor Dandy, yes, the answer is it is a challenge. In the private schools, there are no restrictions really on the sponsor of the school promoting their particular vision. So in a private school, it's very easy to maintain your Catholic identity and to emphasize the various issues and the stances that you take on them. In the church-sponsored schools, it's a bit more difficult because the church-sponsored schools, although they have a right to Christian education as part of the curriculum, you have to be conscious that many of the children attending the schools are not of the Catholic faith, and that there is a right to practice your religion within the country of Kenya particularly, and it becomes a challenge then for the particular school to really focus just on its Catholic identity. Though we have issues with Muslim students and the wearing of the hijab and all of those kind of things, we have to underline our respect for individual people. As some people argue that undermines the Catholic ethos. Other people would say, no, it doesn't undermine the ethos. It promotes this whole idea of respectful people, but also when Muslim students attend our schools, they buy into the Catholic ethos of the school. So it is a challenge about Catholic identity. The bishops are consciously promoting Catholic identity in the Catholic-sponsored schools and certainly in the Catholic private schools. I was interested to hear in the Philippines, the whole, I suppose that the Philippines is a strongly Christian country, and you don't have quite the same issues that we have in a broader multi-religious influence, like the Catholic-Muslim ratio of the population changes the way in which people think about their schools. Catholic schools are sought by people because they tend to be strongly disciplined and morally conscious and promote respect for people. I'm wondering, for example, in the Philippines, the whole issue of parent involvement. We face parent involvement, it's a big issue. Parent education, I think, is a big issue in Kenya and a big issue in most African countries. We're still a long way behind. 100 years of Christian involvement doesn't match 500 years of Christian involvement in the Philippines. So we have a whole lot of different kind of problems. But anyway, I appreciate that input that we had from the Philippines, because it challenged me on a whole lot of things that are still issues for us to look into in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there any other question? Yes, Father. Yes, yeah. Please.
This is Father Robert Gall here at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross. Question for both of you, and thank you for your very fine presentations. The question is has to do with Catholic identity and measuring outcomes, and also parental involvement. I see there's interesting nexus there that could be pursued further. Dr. Ferrer, you did bring up parental involvement, but I'd be looking for some greater specifics regarding what that actually entails and how you're trying to promote it. I know there's a great variety in how it's done, certainly in the United States. And there's certainly challenges with different religious backgrounds of the students, and can be also issues of separated families and so forth. But the parents can be very involved in the mission of the school and even in the teaching and in guaranteeing that the students do their homework. I think this is related to the question of measuring outcomes that are specific to Catholic identity. Specifically, I saw the list that you gave of the different criteria of the tools, the abilities that are needed in today's society. I'm wondering if you're also considering to measure outcomes in terms of knowledge of the Catholic faith and practicing of the Catholic faith by the students after graduation. Thank you.
I'd like to answer the first question first on parent involvement. Actually, I threw that as a challenge to Catholic school superintendents, because we have come to realize that a lot of our parents are actually absentee parents. So, I was proposing that we have to strengthen the involvement of the parents, significant adults, and families in the in the entire teaching learning process. No? And what are some examples that we have seen in very good schools that have systematized these programs? Some schools actually conduct interviews with the families, with the parents, even before the students are enrolled. So there's an interview before enrollment, and then there's an exit interview with the family as well. Even if the school has a size of like 5,000 students, it's not an excuse not to conduct the interviews if the schools are very serious about ensuring that the homes are really partners of the schools. There are also a lot of schools who do parent formation programs, because they've come to realize that given that our learners are digitals, their parents are also probably Generation Y, or some are even digitals as well. And it's very difficult for the parents to respond to the issues that are being raised by their own children, that they will need some help as well. So it's a challenge for the school to take this on, that aside from just making sure that the students are competent with the content areas required by the state curriculum, that you'll have to reach out to the parents in order to ensure that there's really a lot of formation, there's really a lot of that there is a relationship between the home and the school to ensure the holistic formation of the students. As regards the second question, you were asking about the Catholic mission and identity, no?
Yes.
The standards that have been written by the Catholic Educational Association of Philippines. This has been developed by a group of Catholic school educators. And what the attempt really has been to come up with the minimum standards that will say that the school is truly Catholic. The 5 domains that were identified: identity and mission, leadership and governance, learner development, learning environment, operational vitality. Among the 5, it's really the first one that is that's most crucial: Catholic identity and mission. And this is the one that has a lot of discussions across schools, because it's what Brother Tom was saying. We also have schools, say in Mindanao, where more than half of the students are Muslims, but the students are enrolled in Catholic schools. So there you'd have to you'd have to be very, very sensitive and tolerant of your Muslim students, at the same time being very clear about your Catholic identity as a Catholic school. The rollout has been, it has just started. As you can see, again, it's an attempt. It's an attempt for the Catholic schools in the Philippines to come up with standards and benchmarks across Catholic schools, whether they're diocesan, whether they're religious, just so at the minimum we know how to define and how to, correctly identify what Catholic schools are in terms of, standards and identity and mission.
Yeah. We have a comment from one online participant, Basil Odenor. He says, I wish to find out whether there are concerted efforts to promote the cause of salvation according to the mind of the Church. What I see more often than not is that Catholic administrators going emotionally complacent and compromising on their standards. So something related to this last question. So what another question is from
I'd just like to comment on a couple of things that Father Robert was talking about. The first one was the issue of Catholic identity. I understood his question as an Australian. It's hard for me to understand his question as a Kenyan. Catholic identity, if you talk about Catholic identity in Kenya particularly, if you measured it by mass attendance, Catholic identity would be very strong. If you measured it by the knowledge of faith, Catholic identity would not be so strong. Most of our Christians have a fairly basic understanding of what it means to be a Christian, and they go to church, and they go to church for a good spiritual reason, but they also go to church because it's a community and it's a social occasion. And most Catholic Christians would spend most of the day on a Sunday at church, from attendance at Mass to participation in small Christian community activities, for participation in various church groups. Catholic identity there is strong, but the underpinning thinking around Catholic and Catholic teachings would not be so strong. The second part of his question about parent involvement, I would think that in our schools, we find it very difficult to get parents involved in attending school meetings, attending interviews for enrollments. And mostly it's because most of our schools are schools for the more marginalized poor people, and the parents are basically uneducated. They may have completed primary school, many have not completed primary school. Their idea of being a parent, a father or a mother is about really trying to provide, and most people spend all their time finding work to do. we're still dealing with an issue of about 50% unemployment in Kenya, and particularly in pockets of Nairobi and places like that where we have our schools. So the whole thing of parent involvement is a very, very troublesome thing, because most of our students are relying particularly on teachers and schools to provide them with what they need to try to get out of this cycle of poverty, which is a strong experience for most of them. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have another comment from an online participant, Fazo Clifford Bandondo. If panelists can say something about the struggling of private Catholic tertiary institutions, technical colleges and universities. In Southern Africa, I think this area of Catholic education has not been so successful. Do you have any account of that, Brother Tom?
I can empathize with the comment. I know in the management of Tangaza University College, it's very difficult to create the financial resources necessary to keep managing the program. So Tangaza has taken a line that we will specialize in certain areas. We have a theology program, which is quite good. We have an education program, which is very good. We have a program in terms of arts and social sciences, which is mainly related to counseling psychology, communication skills, African cultural studies. So we're specializing in a small area because that's all we can manage financially. Because we don't have government assistance in any form in Kenya and probably in most of Africa, all of these initiatives into tertiary education are very costly, and finding those resources is extremely difficult. We've tried many ways to involve arrangements and MOUs with governments and private enterprises to finance and develop programs in business administration, in management, those kind of areas, but it's very difficult. So I do say, yes, tertiary education is much more costly than secondary education and primary education. So it will be a struggle for quite some time until we find a way of being able to work with government and get some government sponsorship.
What is the situation in the Philippines?
Same situation in the Philippines. We very recently enacted the law that supports tertiary education students, but it's again, it favors the public colleges and universities. So there again, you have some problems in declining enrollment. You have a problem with students preferring the public school system to the private tertiary education system because of the government support. However, it also has been a discussion in the Philippines that a lot of the students choose the Catholic schools, not because they're Catholic at the tertiary level, but because these are the schools that are of very good quality, good reputation. They're the ones that will allow the students to be employed. It's not necessarily that the factor that actually encourage those students to go into the Catholic universities is their Catholicity. It's something that has been discussed very often in the Philippines.
Thank you. So there is a question that we partially answered, I think, but I repeat it. Basil Odenor asks, I wish to find out whether there are concerted efforts to promote the cause of salvation according to the mind of the Church, because what I see more often than not is the Catholic administrators are not are compromising on the standards on this. So is there some more efforts that can be done? What do you think in the Philippines?
Yes, in the Philippines, actually, the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines has been very strong in this initiative, ensuring that the mission of the Church really is, it really is something that the schools we are very serious with, and they work very closely with the Episcopal Commission on Catholic Education of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. So the relationship is very strong. In fact, the initiative to write the Catholic school standards is also because of that, that need to ensure that across all Catholic schools there is there is unanimity, and there is unity, no, and purposiveness in ensuring that the Catholic mission is not forgotten across Catholic schools.
What is the relation between your schools and the Catholic schools owned by the congregations and the bishops? So is that an easy collaboration, or what do you think?
Under the CAP, you have the congregational schools, their members. You also have the diocesan schools. You have the religious schools. And then even Catholic school superintendents who are appointed by the bishops are considered members of CAP. So that's really where the discussions and all of this, balancing act and having to come together is done, no, at the level of the National Association of Catholic Schools. Okay. It's not very easy because Catholic school superintendents would, of course, are very strongly, very obedient to the bishops, which is not exactly the same if you have a religious congregation. And that has also been always part of the discussion in the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines. But so far, the attempt has really been towards ensuring that there is unity in the promotion of mission.
Brother Tom, do you want to add anything?
I have very little to add, Professor Dandy, except to say that one of the confusions is that in our Catholic-sponsored schools and even our Catholic private schools, we have a combined syllabus called Christian Religious Education, which is an examinable subject in Kenya, and it is a kind of non-denominational approach to Christian religious education. Now, in that sense, the bishops only have an influence into the input of the curriculum. The exam is managed by the government, so we tend to teach the curriculum as it is proposed. Now, we do put a Catholic slant on things, but we do have to also meet the curriculum guidelines. And this may be the point of contention. What Ms. Ferrer said about the Philippines and the bishop's supervision of Catholic schools is very much the same. There is a Catholic Education Office which supervises all of the Catholic schools, the private schools, and the government-sponsored schools. So we are all answerable to the Vicar for Catholic Education within the Kenya Council of Bishops.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no other questions, I think we can thank our speakers. There is another question, sorry. So, Faso Clifford Madondo asks, I may have missed the issue on gender aspects in our Catholic schools. There are cultures that value educating the boy child over the girl child. What is the Catholic education contribution in Tanzania and the Philippines?
In Kenya, Tanzania, East Africa, there has been a whole lot of emphasis over the last 10 to 15 years on the education of girls. And the enrollment figures, I haven't got the statistics at my fingertips, but the enrollment of girls over the last 10 to 15 years has probably nearly trebled in terms of their presence in schools. And we're nearly 50-50 in our own schools between the boys and girls attending. So that favoritism of boys has disappeared in the Kenya and Tanzania situation.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, the same in the Philippines. Actually, it's really not an issue. Both males and females are, eligible to enroll in schools, and there's no discrimination.
Okay, Basil Odenor specifies why he asked his question. I raised the question because why I raised the question is that as a Catholic, I attended a Protestant university where I was made to identify with the article to be admitted. I agree that this has its consequences because some persons might go away, but my attending, even my Catholic faith was further strengthened. I am from Nigeria. I am in a Catholic school in Europe now. I realize that in an attempt to respect certain views, we might lose people, whereas schools like Liberty University is growing in the number of people who are committed to the gospel. I think we should use every opportunity to bring in our ideas without hurting anyone. I think I agree. Thank you again, and God bless you, and God bless your work.
Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you.
Bye.